Hey, welcome to another edition of Local Focus. I'm your host, Sebastian Noel. So we wanted to get into mental health, and we want to kind of start with anxiety, depression, that kind of thing, and we will go from there. But today we wanted to kind of focus on some anxiety issues, depression issues. And it's particularly important now because kids in New Mexico are not playing sports, are not physically in school. So you see a lot of anxiety on social media being posted by those kids, thinking that sports is the only thing they have and it's being taken away from them. So my guest uniquely in a position to talk about that because he really found his happiness, his peace once he realized basketball wasn't all that there was to his life. And that's Marlon Cunningham. Marlon, thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me back.
Not a lot of guys have had 2 appearances on the show, man. So you're reaching a status here.
I feel pretty special.
So let's dive right into that, man. Like the big thing right now is sports is the only thing I have and it's being taken away from me. That's a mindset of these kids right now. But when did you realize that maybe sports wasn't the only thing you had and basketball, you didn't love it as much as maybe others wanted you to?
Well, first of all, I'd like to commend these kids and what they're going through now. I just couldn't imagine going through it back then and taking that away from me and everything that I had to go through then. So taking something that I loved away, and I know a lot of these kids are having a hard time. So kudos to them for what they're going through. But I really realized I didn't have a love for basketball after high school. When I got to Texas State for that summer, I was real isolated over there. And for those that have made it past high school, especially in New Mexico, they know it's a dog-eat-dog world. And because I was playing for the wrong reasons, I wasn't necessarily too ready for Division I. So a lot of other different things that played into it, just crazy.
And we'll delve into a lot of those things, Texas State, all that. But so now that you've realized that it's not just about basketball, what makes you happy now? I mean, what has gotten you centered now and you seem pretty at peace?
Running, in all honesty. Once I stopped playing basketball, I really had to find something to fill that void. So I took some UFC classes. I started running. And when I found running 4 or 5 miles a day, just really helps me find that release and just work towards something that maybe I don't know what's coming yet, but just be ready for something.
Right. Another passion you talked about was kind of script writing, that whole acting realm. Talk about that.
A lot of people don't know when I was little, I was in a movie. And I think acting kind of had to take a back seat from basketball. So outside of basketball, once it stopped for me, I really kind of just sat there and I was like, what do I like to do? And I realized that was acting and script writing. So I wrote a couple scripts. I feel as though my scripts can go from wide range. I have very versatile with that. So just finding different things other than basketball that are able to make anybody happy.
So let's backtrack a little bit. When did basketball go from being something that was fun to you to when did it start to change where expectations were higher than normal? And I mean, I know you said some of the anxiety attacks didn't start till college, but if we can backtrack to high school, is that when some things started to change, you think?
Most definitely. I think it was still really fun for me when I was younger because there wasn't any pressure from coaches or other players or any other expectations. I could just go out and be me and be the player that I wanted to be. But as I got older and as I got more recruited and more kind of in the limelight, things kind of started taking a different turn. And I just had to really, I felt isolated in a lot of ways.
So let's dig into that more. You talked about, obviously, the recruiting piece. We talked about a little bit before the show about expectations. So here you are at Albuquerque High, where expectations are sometimes a little unrealistic, in my opinion. In my opinion, right? People are living in the past a little bit over there. So you couple that with the fact that, you know, you're the man on the team and college recruiting. What does that do to your mental health? What does that change your mindset about basketball?
It just didn't feel fun for me anymore. It felt as though that I was playing for the wrong reasons. I wasn't getting out there for myself. I wasn't performing for myself. Even with fellow classmates walking in there, hey, are you going to get some dunks tonight? You know, you got to do this, you got to do that. So I always tried to play into the persona that was not myself rather than just being myself and doing it for the right reasons.
Right. Now you add Craig Neal into the equation. The big story at the time is, okay, Craig Neal's recruiting you. You're going to be a Lobo, where, you know, you would think that that would be awesome. It probably made things even worse, right, in your mind. So talk about what that kind of did to you.
For me, at first, it all felt surreal. I was like, wow, being able to grow up here and be offered a scholarship and have an opportunity to play, it was all just like a dream.
Right.
And that dream was ended pretty quickly when others' opinions started to voice. And any and everywhere, people had opinions, good or bad, on what I should do or how my game should be. And I think because there's so little recruitment for New Mexico kids, and New Mexico kids are shadowed in some ways, that when these athletes do come around, that everyone feels as though they have a piece of their pie when it's really.
So at that point, I mean, you're what, 16, 17?
15, 16.
Okay, so you're 16 years old. This starts happening. I'm going to ask you now, the narrative of, oh, Craig Neal's only doing this as a publicity stunt. Everyone in town hates Craig Neal, so he needs some good publicity. So if he can march into Albuquerque High and pretend he's recruiting a local kid, that was happening. People were saying that. Did you hear that?
Oh, I heard it all.
I mean, and how do you process that?
I remember I was just angry. I was so angry at the world. I was angry because I felt as though people didn't know me, and they were judging me for somebody they thought I should be, and judging it for either feels because of Coach Craig Neal, or I felt as though it was all because of me. And personally, I had a lot of good relationships with Coach Neal and Coach Weir when they recruited me and talked with me, but everyone had something to say somewhere along the lines.
And could you already feel at the time your love of basketball shrinking, and did you feel like you were starting to become not in a good place?
Very much so. I just, like I said, I felt like I was playing for the wrong reasons. I felt as though basketball was very like one track minded for me, and it was just basketball, rather than let's see that basketball is making me unhappy because of whatever reasons, and let's find an outlet for that. But
we talked about this the other day at lunch. This was not doing a good thing to some of the relationships you had, whether that be with friends, family, girlfriend at the time. Talk about that, how even that mindset, your mindset and where you were at mentally changed the way you were interacting with people.
It just felt as though like Tupac said, it's me against the world. And no matter what aspect you play into it, from an ex-girlfriend to coaches to teammates to anything along those lines, that although it wasn't those people, I was just taking it out on them. And I wasn't the best person I could be for them in a lot of relationships on or off the court because I was so unhappy with myself.
Can you give an example of that maybe to our audience so they can kind of see like a warning sign almost to our audience? Like, what were some of the things that were going on? Like, how did it change your relationship with your either parents, girlfriend, or whatever? I mean, is there something you want to maybe could point out that someone could relate to?
I think maybe just feeling like on edge all the time, and feeling though just very irritable. I remember that my family, you know, I'm very thankful for them because I remember at that time they kind of had to deal with a lot. A lot of people didn't see behind the scenes where I would kind of lash out at them or be angry because of not necessarily something they did or an interaction between the two of us, but just something that was triggered from way back when, from suppressed emotions, from everything else. So it was just really like just on edge and just like very toxic towards everybody.
We're going to take our first time out here with Marlon, and when Mar and I get back, we'll talk about where he would go to reach out, maybe the support system in place there or lack thereof, and then we'll move forward into the college years after that. We'll be right back.
2 to shoot. They'll get one off, and it'll count high off the window.
Oh my gosh.
There's the long three.
Boom.
Bang. Martinez will beat the buzzer. Got it to go.
Work, drive, and kick. Three's in the air. It's good.
Nice pass on the nice block by Hernandez Crawford.
And Brown in the transition. But why not, Steve? Is Corbalan's gonna go and he puts it away. And Corbalan wants to put it down. But here comes Vasquez. Brown, you can't leave him alone. Put it down.
Gershon in transition. 3-on-2. Gershon gonna go all the way. Whoa, Morgan.
Back with Marlon Cunningham, we're talking about your basketball kind of taking a backseat to other things in your life, and how you didn't think that was a bad thing. You realized later in life that there was more to life than basketball. And when you want to pick up to, we kind of talked about your time at Albuquerque High. Now, was there any point at this time where you reached out to anybody? Did you think you were already in a bad place? Did you start looking for people to reach out to? Take us into that.
In high school, no, I didn't really think that I was in a bad place. I just felt like I had a chip on my shoulder towards everyone, meaning that like no matter where I went, no matter anything, I had something to prove. And it wasn't until after high school where I was really isolated on my own, and I had to look in the mirror and say, okay, what are the reasons causing why I'm feeling and why am I feeling this way? And something's going on. And I started to really realize that it was just more than basketball.
Lastly, on high school, now, looking back, did you kind of realize or notice a change in you between your junior and senior season?
Looking back on it, most definitely. But in the moments, looking back on it, no, I don't think I did. I just felt as though that, again, I had to come out with something to prove. And instead of just having fun with it and realizing like, hey, it's my senior year with these guys. Let's have fun. Let's just try to make some noise, where it was, no, I got to do this, this, and that for whoever.
Right. So take us forward now to college. Your first stop, Texas State, and what was that like?
Texas State was when I first got offered from the coaching staff over there, I just felt like so relieved, because I felt as though that I was like, finally somebody sees my potential and somebody's willing to give me a chance. And because of the other circumstances that had happened, I just felt grateful. But when you get there, and a lot of athletes will vouch, it's a whole different story. And it's for the better, but I just realized that I definitely needed to grow as a person and as a player. And I could have done a lot more to prepare them, but that's okay, because it was just more than basketball. And feeling alone, I was one of 2 freshmen recruited on that team, and the other guys were upperclassmen. Not only that, but I was living in an isolated dorm with football players away from all the basketball players. And because my work ethic wasn't where it should have been on the court, my teammates weren't really messing with me. And so I felt alone. And I realized then that, all right, at any level after high school, you really got to love the game. And especially at the Division I level, you really got to put in a different grind. We would have Monday through Friday from 5 a.m. to probably about 8 or 9 at night. And then there are dudes hitting me up talking about, hey, we got to go get an extra shots at 2 a.m. And I'm like, Dude, no, I'm not doing that. Like, I don't love basketball that much.
Was that kind of an aha moment for you?
Most definitely. Just being in that atmosphere and being away, I do think I was a little bit homesick. I don't think that was all of it. I think that over the years of just not being able to feel what I was supposed to feel. And on a side note, a lot of athletes are, especially male athletes, are taught that they're not supposed to feel anything and they're just supposed to be strong and stone cold. And that there's a study behind athletes' pressure that they deal with in games. I mean, you remember the Albuquerque High Valley games, sold out crowds. Right. Those anxiety levels and those pressure levels mess people up for the rest of their lives. So, especially with the fact that athletes don't ever deal with those pressures or emotions from bad games they had or coaches or anything, that it just really is. Being alone for me realized that it was an accumulation of things over time.
Right. So at that point, what is that depression? What is that isolation? What does that look like?
In all honesty, I'm not afraid to say it because I am me. And at the time I was in a very dark place. I would cry twice a day and I was miserable because I was missing my family. I didn't want to be there. I was so unhappy. And I think the thing that hurt most for me was that nobody back home understood. I was trying to reach out to certain people and tell them like, yo, it's not just about being away from y'all. It's just, I don't want to do this. And everyone's seeing it like, nah, you made it to D1, bro. You got to do it. And me still feeling like, well, I got to stick this out because everybody's telling me to.
So at this point, was the pushback still, Marlon's not putting in the work, Marlon's homesick, Marlon's soft, and people weren't realizing that, hey, you were just not into basketball anymore?
Exactly. And it took me going to Highlands and finding my voice and finding myself and saying like, okay, y'all got to understand that I'm not wanting to play basketball at all whatsoever. It's not because of any of this other stuff. And you can say whatever you want, but at the end of the day, I know what it is for me and why I walked away.
Now, this got to a point where you were having anxiety attacks, right?
Yes.
When was your first anxiety attack?
It was at Highlands. I was in my boot. I had torn all the ligaments in my left foot, so I was already kind of going through things. And there was an incident in the cafeteria that happened, and I went to my room and I just felt myself start shaking, and I just fell to the floor. And I honestly thought that I was having a heart attack. I started honestly tripping. I was like, I'm too young to have a heart attack. Like, what's going on? So I kind of started doing some research on it, and it said anxiety attacks and panic attacks. So I thought, nah, that's not me. Like, what am I supposed to be anxious for? I'm not scared of anything.
And there's still a stigma attached to the male athlete, right? Like this can't happen, right? Because that's just the word you always hear is soft, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, you're not only battling anxiety attacks, but you're battling that stigma, correct?
Correct. And an athlete that I really was watching, I can't remember, the Gypsy King, the fighter.
Right.
And also with Kevin Love, they talk about mental health. And I would like to change it from being mental illness to mental health, because it's not an illness, regardless of its depression, anxiety. Some people have PTSD, whatever it is, it's health. And there really has to be a new directive and a new narrative in looking at how we're supposed to treat mental health.
So at that point, what was triggering your anxiety attacks?
I feel as though it was an accumulation of things, from things I might not have dealt with over the years to not being able to play basketball to because I was injured, and being away from home. Even though I was an hour and 45 minutes away, I didn't really get to see my family that much. I didn't live with the basketball players. I lived, since I committed to Highlands so late, I wasn't able to room with them. I was still close with some of the teammates, but again, with that male stigma, I couldn't, and I didn't feel as though I could tell them what was going on, because I didn't want to be perceived as soft or any of the other words that I'm not going to say on the TV show.
Well, we're not allowed to say them, it turns out. We're not allowed to say those words. So what was but I mean, you make the great point, obviously. So before we go to break, I mean, what was the breaking point there at Highlands where you just decided, man, there's so much more to my life than basketball?
It was when I got cleared from my injury. I realized that I was kind of in the same point I was at Texas State, where, all right, if I want to play and if I want to do this at the next level, I've got to put in serious work. And especially coming back from that injury, I looked at myself in the mirror and said, I don't want to do anything academically wise, and I don't want to have to put in that extra work to be able to play next year. So I'm just going to walk away. And I had told myself, all right, if anything happens significant, there's going to be a sign. I'm going to know that's going to affirmed this decision. And 2 days later, Coach Snell met with all of us and said that he was leaving for Highlands. Then we didn't know to help out with UNM. So.
Right. So that was your son. Coach is leaving, I'm leaving.
Exactly. Because Coach Dominguez and I were real cool, and I appreciate him, and he's a good guy. But Coach Snow was really the one that recruited me, and
right.
we had that relationship. So I was like, there it is.
Take our final time out here, come back with Marlon, talk about maybe some backlash that he still gets from some of these decisions, and then close up some advice he has for you, the viewer.
The New Mexico High School Coaches Association, established in 1941, is an organization of New Mexico's best and most professional interscholastic coaches. Coaches across work daily to help our student athletes excel in the classroom, on the field of play, and in our communities. Students that participate in interscholastic activities attain higher grades, higher graduation rates, and higher wages. Responsible for the North-South All-Star Games, statewide Coaches Award Program, and providing multiple professional development opportunities for New Mexico's coaches. Be a great coach by coaching beyond the game.
Don't sacrifice quality of flavor when you're in a hurry. Golden Pride offers ribs, fried chicken, green and red chili breakfast burritos, and Frontier Cinnabons. 4 great locations, or visit us online at goldenpride@abq.com. Golden Pride Barbecue Chicken and Ribs, proud supporter of Proview Sports Network.
Well, I'm going to the frontier, walk up to the cashier, order up a root beer and a number 1. Cover it with green stuff, 1 scoop is not enough. Find a booth is real tough, back by the Duke. Meet my family, meet my friends in the quirkiest restaurant I have ever been. All of Albuquerque's favorite spot, it's the Frontier Restaurant.
The Frontier Restaurant is a proud supporter of Proview Sports Network.
Back with Marlon Cunningham. Mar, how relieved did you feel to be done with competitive college basketball?
When I got home, there were still some added pressures that I had to work through, but finally hanging up my jersey from the collegiate level was just such a relief, because I was able to come home and find my identity and find what I wanted to do, and I'm very, very thankful and blessed to have such a supportive family who came around and understood that, hey, basketball is not all of Marlon's narrative. There's so much more to him, and let's be supportive and let's help him find what he likes to do.
So let's dig into that more, because that, I would imagine, that has to be one of the toughest things for you and kids in general is, when you're as good as you were, and when you're at that level, mama's thinking NBA, right?
Yeah.
So, talk about the pressure. Doesn't it start with the Barretts?
It does. Realistically, going after high school and seeing the percentages and seeing how much of college is a business, and to make it to the NBA, you really have to kind of be in the right situation. Expectations from parents, from the community, from the media are just too high for these young athletes. And I feel as though from a young age, I remember it started to come about, and people don't realize that these kids are just kids, and people treat these kids and hold these kids to such a higher expectation just because they're supposed to carry them out or be the next one up. But in reality, it's like everybody has bad games.
Right.
And being in the limelight, you're not allowed to do anything wrong, especially have bad games.
We talked a little bit at lunch the other day about what I call the New Mexico syndrome now, where we mentioned in a previous episode where we talked about J.B. White, where when people in the community, they see a successful or potentially successful athlete that maybe makes it out of New Mexico, and instead of, it takes a village to push them up, there's kind of some pulling down. Did you experience any of that? And why does that happen in New Mexico?
I did experience it. I think there's a lot of different things that could play into that. But one for sure for me is that there's not a lot of New Mexico kids that are able to make it out. If you look at a state like Texas, there's 2 or 3 kids going to the next level on each team. And one might be going to Kentucky and the next might be going to Kansas. Okay. And the community is more I don't want to say like desensitized, but they're just used to it. You know what I mean? They're used to being able to see those high caliber athletes. And I think when that comes about here, the community and everybody just sees that and puts that pressure on them rather than like, hey, let's support them and anything they need and anything we can do for them, I want to do that instead of just, oh, they're going to make it out. I'm going to try to jump on the bandwagon and hop on the train.
Let's tie that back to mental health. When you have this kind of negativity from the community combined with unreasonable expectations, what does that do to your mental health? What does that do to potential depression? And do you have any examples of that with you? I mean, what did that do to you when you started to see some of that backlash?
It feeds into it a lot because when it's, walking throughout the school throughout the day, oh, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, this game, from getting calls from the media to other coaches to people within the program. It's just so, I think it's just wrong, in all honesty, because, yeah, people are entitled to have their opinion, but people feel entitled to have their opinion rather than stepping back and saying, this kid is 15, 16 years old, like not telling what other pressures he's going through or whatever. And some kids' stories, they have to go home and help their little brothers out or little sisters or whatever. And I'm very thankful that my family was supportive and all that coming around. But it's just about realizing that at the end of the day, these people are their people too, and just be easy on them.
Another example of that I know you mentioned to me in the past was that, we're speaking of negativity now, that, you had some teammates that started kind of in on, this guy's D1, he just missed the bucket. So talk about that when you don't have a support system, what ideally should be your band of brothers, when that kind of turns sour. What does that do to your mental health?
It was definitely hard because when you felt like you couldn't turn to anybody else, and in the locker room at the end of the day, those dudes are supposed to be there for you regardless of it. It just sucked. And of course, growing up now and having talks with some of these guys, and I've forgiven them and we're cool and it's okay. But going through it now, I would just ask them like, why were you so jealous? And some of them have admitted that it's just because it wasn't me. Right. I wanted to be the one that was going to UNM instead of every team and every player has to recognize their role. And that's okay for anybody and any player that it's like, hey, this dude is the star here. Like when I got to college, I had to do that because there was dudes that were scorers and this and that. I said, if I want to play, I've got to just rebound and defend and do what I've got to do.
So lastly, advice to kids that are in sports right now that are pretty much of the mindset like, man, we're the only ones not playing. The governor has taken away what I'm here to do, which is play high school sports. You obviously have come to a place where there's so much more than that. What would your advice be to those kids?
Just don't be afraid to let one another know that I'm here for your brother or sister. And it doesn't even have to be like obviously your actual brother or sister, but coming together as a community and saying, hey, you're going through these hard times here in, Espanola, and I'm going through these hard times in Cruces. Like we can still come together and be there for one another. We're in a huge society today of technology, and it's very easy to connect with one another. So we might as well use it for good. And letting these kids know that it's okay to ask someone you trust for advice or let them know how you're feeling, because building that up over time and letting that go on and on and on isn't good for anybody.
Well, Marlon, I think that's a perfect way to close. I know the NMA put out some videos about Everybody Matters, numbers that you can reach out to. And Marlon, that's some great advice at the end there. And it's nice to see, I don't know if you ever look back on it, but that senior year versus now, how much more you're smiling and how much happier you are now. So there's obviously more than basketball. Thanks for coming in. Thanks everybody for watching, and good night.